Good morning, everybody, and you're very, very welcome to The Future is Bright, our 4 webinars, which will take place over this morning and tomorrow morning. And on behalf of CultureWorks, my name is Liz Kelly, and I'd like to welcome each of our panelists this morning. We're expecting some really great conversation and stimulating debate even. So sit tight and we hope that you enjoy it. At the end of today's webinar, there's a networking opportunity. So you simply switch out of your Zoom and into the link to join the networking afterwards. So our panelists are remaining on for that. You'll have an opportunity to chat to each other and to them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maureen Kennelly, Director of the Arts Council, who has kindly joined us this morning. And so over to you, Maureen, and you're very welcome.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. It's absolutely fantastic to know there's such a large crowd tuning in this morning. Thanks so much for making time. I know we have a deadline later on today, which probably lots of people are wrestling with. So thanks for being able to make time for this morning. This webinar series today and tomorrow will bring together a range of perspectives and reflections aimed at shedding further light into the creation presentation of digital work. And I want to say a huge thanks to CultureWorks, to Liz and her team, who've done fantastic work in the last month or so. We all know that much has changed over the past year, of course, and it's with a sense of optimism and energy that we look forward to exploring the many dimensions of the digital world with you. This digital toolbox comprises of these 2-day webinars and a set of downloadable checklists and resources, and essentially there's a snapshot in time. As we all know, the digital world is characterized by massive change, very rapid change. So in many ways, today's the beginning of our course through the digital world as we prepare to re-emerge from lockdown and take the first tentative steps in the direction of hybrid and live in-person events. So this webinar series is future focused, and we hope that it'll help you to find your way through the how and why of making and presenting work digitally. We've a range of fantastic speakers for you, and they're focused on the immediate needs of art forms to make that switch to online production and presentation of work. The webinars will span questions of how work is made, produced, disseminated, and ultimately how, and I suppose if, audiences will respond and interact with online work. The contributors have been invited for the freshness and the imaginative approach that they've taken, and they'll offer us insights into how the arts continue to rise to the challenges and harness the opportunities of creating and disseminating online. Very, very creative approaches to digital making presenting have evolved over the last 14 or 15 months, and they've encouraged many people to rethink how they work, how they make work, and perhaps more importantly, even how they interact with audiences. And many artists and organizations continue to extend their reach and their creative potential. And has been staggering to observe. It's absolutely phenomenal how people have responded. The word hybrid has been cast around a lot over the last months. And this morning's webinar, No Going Back, will focus on these new ways of working. And we're also going to delve into the world of monetizing work later on today with our digital business webinar. We ask if it's possible to monetize online work, how it's done. Issues of rights and licensing have emerged as a consideration for organizations, and the new and very intriguing phenomenon of non-fungible tokens, which have reaped massive rewards for many artists. We're going to explore that too. And then tomorrow's webinars will look at innovation in practice, and we'll hear from those who are digital natives and from those who adapted and converted their work for online production and dissemination. And again, amazing work's gone on in that regard. And the ever-present question of audiences and who's looking in will be discussed. And obviously that's critical in terms of ourselves and the Arts Council. The artists and the public are the twin concerns for us. So these webinars demonstrate that. In our digital dissemination discussion, we're going to ask how audiences are reached. How has the relationship between producer and presenter of the work changed, given the pervasiveness of digital making and presenting? And we'll also ask, what data is it possible to collect? And then once you have the data, how do you use it? So I want to thank each of our panelists for giving their precious time, for agreeing to share their insights with us. We're really, really grateful to you. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And our thanks too to the chairs of each of these events. And at this point, I'm going to introduce you to Alwyn Daw, who will be known to many of you. She's going to host this morning's webinar, which is entitled No Going Back. Alwyn is a policy analyst and consultant and has recently led many of the gender equality and diversity projects in the arts and culture institutions, and including our own in the Arts Council. So I'll hand you over now to Alwyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to the first webinar as part of the Digital Toolbox. Undoubtedly, this past year has set challenges for the arts that in many ways have been unprecedented. However, creative approaches to digital making and presenting have evolved, encouraging many to rethink how they work and, perhaps more importantly, how they interact with audiences. Many continue to extend their reach and creative potential. The word hybrid, as Maureen has said, has been widely used over the past months, and today's webinar will focus on new ways of working, ranging from planning to troubleshooting. We're absolutely delighted to be joined by 4 speakers whose experiences and insights in the visual arts, theatre, literature and music during this period of change will undoubtedly provide food for thought. Each of our speakers this morning will share their shot of knowledge, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A function after our speakers have concluded their contributions. A reminder also, before we get underway, that there will be networking after the session via the wonder.me platform. As Liz has mentioned, you'll have received the link already, which will provide another opportunity to interact and ask questions. So just to say, if you don't get a chance to direct one of your questions to one of our panelists today, there will be a second opportunity to do so. So our first speaker is Neil Murray. Neil is the co-director of the Abbey Theatre and has held many roles at senior level in the theatre world, including at National Theatre of Scotland and in producing NTS international work, which toured to China, USA, Japan, Canada, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Poland and Ireland. He also developed and managed co-productions with companies as diverse as the National Theatre of Great Britain, the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Barbican and Royal Court Theatre London, Campo in Ghent, Belgium, Parco, Tokyo, Japan. Hope I'm getting the pronunciations right here, Neil, and Team in New York. So Neil, over to you for your shot of knowledge.
Good morning, everybody. In the words of Peter Falk, in my favorite film, Wings of Desire, I can't see you, but I know you're there. What I'm going to talk about briefly in just 5 minutes, I hope, is the perspective of digital work from the Abbey Theatre's point of view, from a sense of where we were, where we are now, perhaps, and where we are going. In March 2020, the Abbey felt pretty much ahead of the field in terms of our digital outputs. We were utilizing digital platforms to promote our work with relatively sophisticated trailers. We had the Abbey podcasts, and we had a quite sophisticated social media advertising and posts. So we had a really active and engaged social media following, but the key aim of that following was basically diverting people to buy physical tickets to see shows at the Abbey or in another theatre, sometimes a pub, somewhere in the world. And that all completely changed in March 2020. So over the last year, what we have been doing, in a way, as Liz just, as Maureen just pointed out, as we've been primarily delivering our programs through digital platforms, but which has enabled us to continue the core function of the Abbey and really the core function of the arts, which is to connect artists with audiences. The Abbey was quick out of the blocks. We were perhaps the first company, not just in Ireland, but pretty much in the world, to do a major digital project with our Dear Ireland project, which we streamed for 4 nights in April 2020 to an online audience of over 250,000. In addition to that, we made work that embraced COVID restrictions, for the most part, solo performances that were pre-recorded, like Dear Ireland, but also 14 Voices from the Bloodied Field, looking at the Bloody Sunday Massacre, and Home Part 1, which was our looking at the testimonies from the mother and baby home inquiry. We also rehearsed and recorded an entire new production of our play, This Beautiful Village, into this beautiful virtual village, which we made on Zoom with actors logging in and performing from home and indeed rehearsing from home. All of this meant that we could adhere to strict safety measures, but it feels as though now we're over that stage. Things are moving on. I think there's definitely a sense of digital exhaustion, and I think a sense of optimism now that we're moving towards a reopening of of our society and the arts. So where are we going? What's the next stage for us? Nothing beats live theatre, but COVID has given us an opportunity to provide more access to our work. To truly be a national theatre as the Abbey is, we need to consider this going forward. The Abbey's audience has been growing in the preceding 4 years up to COVID. So in 2019, we were achieving a worldwide physical audience of approximately 150,000 people seeing our work in theatres and spaces across the world. In 2020, this increased to 690,000 people viewing our work, over 40% of them from outside of Ireland. And of that 690,000, only 23,000 were actually either in the Abbey or in the fields up at Immer for the Great Hunger Project. So the vast majority of that audience was an online audience. Now, we shouldn't get carried away about this. It's fantastic and it gives us a real opportunity, but they watch differently. Our research shows that 690,000, the 670,000 online probably watch for an average of about 23 minutes. So that's 2 of our Dear Island short films out of 50, or 2 of the 14 voices, or perhaps 10 of the excerpts from the Home Project. But we can't ignore that new following. We almost certainly won't be able to visit them all in their hometowns, cities, or villages. So what do? I'm afraid I learned a really horrible new word yesterday, which I'm going to say, so you might want to cover your ears. And it's in the sense of talking about hybrid art forms. It's a hybrid word. The word I was told by one of our marketing team yesterday is phygital, which is the PHY of physical and the GITAL of digital, a phygital world, which is, I promise I will never use that word again. However, I know what it means, and I think we all know what it means. So at 11 o'clock this morning, I'm about 20 minutes ahead of, or 45 minutes ahead of being able to tell you what it is. So the Abbey is announcing a new approach for work this morning at 11 a.m. We're announcing 2 new plays, 2 productions, which will embrace this new phygital world. I've used that word again, that's the last time. And this work will be streamed live for 2 performances. It'll be on demand for 2 weeks following those 2 live performances. And we very much hope that they will also be performed in front of a live audience, if restrictions allow. And obviously we're waiting on new announcements tomorrow from the government, and also conversations with Arts Council and government around possible pilot programs. Both of these shows resemble what we would have done in the past. They have ensemble casts. We're already rehearsing one of them for 3 weeks. So we're making this show as we would have made it in the past, but it's going to play to an audience in the theatre, but we'll have almost certainly, you know, a live audience and then an on-demand stream audience. This raises lots of questions, of which Maureen has already raised some of them, which will be coming up later in the day, so I won't dwell on them, in terms of issues around monetization. I think there's also particular issues around rights for artists. I think this is an opportunity in some senses for increased income for performers and creative teams from work staying up online longer than just the live performance, where generally, certainly in theatre, it's the writer is the main beneficiary of royalties. We're looking at the Abbey of now how do performers share that, how do designers share that as well. And I think moving forward, what's almost certain is that almost every show will need to have a high quality digital life. Kwame Kwayama, the director of the Young Vic in London, announced their new program last week and said every show they make will have now a digital life. But that raises questions which I hope will be teased out today in other areas, which is who has access to make high quality digital work? Is there going to be discrimination in that only the wealthy companies like the Abbey, who we have the means to employ high quality digital expertise? So I think there's a real role for the Arts Council and government in creating capital infrastructure to allow work to be captured at the highest level, not just in our big theatres, but in small village halls and in small theatres all around Ireland. And very briefly to conclude, when we think of a digital world, we must not forget the issues around access as well. Access is, there's a sense of, oh, well, it's accessible because it's on screen, but we're already having issues. For example, we try and do all of our work in Irish Sign Language and British Sign Language in the Abbey. How do you capture that online? How do you provide captions for digital work that doesn't intrude on other people's view? And how do we make it accessible and not intrusive for people? And how do we audio describe digital work? So there are the whole areas. But to conclude, in some ways it's been an exciting year born out of necessity, but I think there's a whole raft of challenges moving ahead, but hopefully we do that with optimism as we take these tentative steps back into a world of welcoming audiences, back to the Abbey, back to theatres, concert halls, village halls all over Ireland. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neil, and much to think about. The future is definitely bright, but it's also phygital.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really worrisome.
That's it.
Thank you for introducing that new word into our lexicon. Much appreciated, I think. So thanks so much, Neil. We're going to move on in a similar vein. We're also looking at theatre, but also literature. So our next speaker is Brian Fenton from Druid. And I think most importantly in Brian's biog, he says that he's originally from Cork. So I think it's important we mention that. So Brian has been at Druid since 2018. Credits at Druid include Epiphany, The Beacon, The Cherry Orchard, Druid Gregory, Once Upon a Bridge, and Boland, Journey of a Poet. Prior to that, Brian worked at the Old Vic. Productions at the Old Vic include Girl from the North Country, also West End and Broadway, The Hairy Ape, also Park Avenue, New York, Art, and A Christmas Carol, also Broadway. So Brian, looking forward to your shot now.
Thanks very much. Lovely to be here. Yeah, so I'm echoing probably a lot of what Neil has said, and I'll echo the word phygital as well at some point, don't worry. So just I suppose from my point of view, just giving a snapshot, I suppose, of a Druid perspective of where we're at and where we're going, I suppose, and specific mention of the last Druid production you mentioned there, which is Boland, Journey of a Poet, as probably a good example of where we've got to at Druid. So just to start a little bit, just at the very, just a couple of weeks leading up to the country shutting down, I suppose in February and March of last year, we had just completed a live to cinema broadcast of the Tom Murphy version of The Cherry Orchard, live from the Black Box Theatre in Galway. And that was, it's different. It's pre-COVID in the sense that it was a full auditorium of bodies plus cameras at the back of the auditorium, broadcasting straight to cinema via satellite, etc. But it gave us our first kind of sniff of how to broadcast work in that way, albeit on a particular type of scale in that instance. So I suppose when COVID hit, we made an immediate organizational commitment that we will try and create work and continue our interaction with audiences, and particularly continue to support artists in whatever way we can, and be as flexible and adaptable as we need to be going forward. So I suppose we've had an incredibly busy year at Druid. We have now done 2 series of digital poetry films called the Cool Park Poetry Series. We delivered an outdoor in-person large-scale production called Druid Gregory, which was a Galway 2020 commission, and that toured County Galway, including playing in Cool Park. We have this year in February and April delivered 2 live stream theatre productions from the Miclally Theatre. So much like Neil was mentioning with the upcoming work at the Abbey, it was 4 live stream performances from the Miclally and a subsequent week-long on-demand offering. We delivered schools performances during COVID of On the Outside by Tom Murphy. We doubled down on our artist development programs, so the Marie Mullen Bursary, Fuel, and the Druid Debuts. And again, similar to Neil, we're at 12 o'clock today, we're announcing our upcoming kind of summer season. We're trailing some work there, including a radio drama that we're developing with RTE. So we've had to be, as you can see, adaptable and think about work in new ways. And I suppose looking at where we are now, having last year, we have now identified models of working, new ways of working. And one of the points I suppose I'd start with is there's a broad consensus, it seems to us, that in talking to artists and agents and technical staff and indeed venues, a broad consensus that what we have to our advantage is precedent in terms of creating theatre productions. And in broad terms, I suppose what we did at Druid was we very much used those existing precedents to adapt our models in terms of contracting and the ways we produce theatres. So we didn't, I remember there was a conversation very early on in COVID of, do we all have to start looking at the way film is made and the way TV is made? But I suppose that's just a point to make, is that we are very much, I think, and in line with other companies, I think in the sector, we're, using to our advantage the precedent that was already there. So I suppose just some headlines before I talk about Boland, just some headlines on, I suppose, digital dissemination of work at Druid. One of the significant, I suppose, decisions we made in starting to look at putting work out digitally during COVID was we decided that we were conscious that artists particularly were creating work in the context of deep uncertainty, really, and that artists were being offered a contract, but there was a sense of what happens if it's postponed, what happens if it's cancelled. And of course, we didn't have the answers. We're like everyone else following this pandemic. So we offered minimum guarantee contracts on every digital production that we made. So a good example, I suppose, was the Sonia Kelly live stream production, Once Upon a Bridge, which was in February of this year. Artists worked for 3 weeks, but on contracts of 6-week minimum guarantees. So we were able to, I suppose, create the conditions within that artists could create work without the concern, I suppose, about the ongoing uncertainty around COVID. And it's something that certainly sounds like it's coming down the tracks today as a discussion point. This piece on putting a value on the work, but also making it accessible and affordable. So there's an ongoing conversation there, which is certainly one that we could have for many, many hours. And the other priority, I suppose, in terms of our digital dissemination of work was the focus on live, and in whatever way we can to create the live experience. So hence the 2 productions, I suppose, this year, we were very keen that they be initially live streamed and then subsequently available on demand. So I suppose protecting that live experience, that frisson of energy, when even if you're sitting on your couch looking at your laptop, it is starting in 2 minutes and you have to, turn off your phone and all that kind of thing. So just picking up on, Boland, Journey of a Poet, just as a brief snapshot, really, it was a theatre production created in the McLally Theatre, directed by Gary Hines. It starred Siobhan Cullen as Yvonne Boland, and Siobhan was accompanied on stage by a non-speaking painter, the Irish artist Debbie Chapman. As I mentioned, we did 4 live stream performances, Thursday, Friday, and 2 shows Saturday, and then the following week was an on-demand offering. The production, just because I was encouraged to kind of break it down a little bit today, the production has had 17 contracts for freelance individuals. So that's the creative team, obviously the 2 performers, the technical staff, which in this instance obviously included things like vision mixing and cameras and live stream technicians, and then obviously supported by our regular Druid team of production management, stage management, and that kind of thing. And the underlying rights, I suppose, was obviously with the Yvonne Boland estate. So that was the initial peg in that. In terms of the model of producing that, I mean, it was very much based, as I said, on precedent that was already established. So, the underlying rights was an advance plus a royalty. Creative team were on fees, and performers and technical staff were on weekly salaries. The nuance, I suppose, in this new world we're in is that the on-demand offering attracted additional payments. So anyone on performers or anyone on weekly salary, there was an additional payment based on the weekly salary, and then anyone on a fee, such as creative team, it was an additional percentage of their original fee to entitle us, I suppose, to do the on-demand offering. I suppose just a word on the broadcast rights piece, which I was asked to just mention. I suppose just a few headlines on that would be that our experience is that the terms from the very beginning with artists and agents and creative teams, the terms must be crystal clear. I suppose that's just something that we're very clear on. Those discussions involve discussions around, how limited is the window? Is the piece non-downloadable? What's the platform? What's the ticket price? So to a certain extent, not terribly different to conversations we would have had anyway about putting work out, but certainly those conversations, particularly around the on-demand piece, would all center around being really clear about the parameters of what we're looking to put together, and that forms the basis, of course, then of any additional payments. And then I suppose the summary on that really, and obviously I happy to chat further in any in the Q&A later, indeed the networking piece. But I suppose as Neil alluded to, I think there are fascinating conversations going on at the moment about programming. I suppose whether a combination of hybrid, a combination of digital plus in-person programming will be is that going to be expected by audiences? It's a question we're asking ourselves at the moment. To what extent will, if we just produce an in-person theatre production later this year, is there an expectation from audiences that we might look to make it available in some way to those who, for whatever reason, can't get to Galway or can't get to our production? It's a point to make that 35 countries around the world watched our production of Once Upon a Bridge earlier this year, and that is it was absolutely staggering at the time to think that there were 35 countries tuning into our little theatre in Galway, and that of course for the dissemination of Irish companies and the work of Irish artists, it's an extraordinary opportunity as well. There's certainly more work to do. I think there's ongoing conversations around future usage of recordings of productions. We don't necessarily know these answers yet. I think there's interesting conversations around how do we all share the benefit of any sort of future usage of a recording or of a production. We're probably at a stage where I would imagine many companies have now created work in its initial form as a live stream or on-demand offering, but maybe haven't yet turned our attention or looked at, is there opportunity next year for future usage, that kind of thing. So there are conversations that are still happening. I suppose the final piece from me, I suppose, is that just to acknowledge how wonderful artists and their representatives and venues and everything have been in the last year, and indeed other companies in the sector. I think there's been a real feeling, I would suggest, of collegiality and trying to work this thing out together. And as I said, still conversations ongoing, but it's been certainly there's a sense that we're all in this together. And I'd suggest if anyone has any sort of questions or uncertainties around it, just to reach out to your peers or a company who's done that kind of thing already, or indeed, the toolbox sounds fantastic, because it's exactly what I think a lot of people that I would have conversations with are looking for. So this is all great to be doing. But yeah, so that's kind of a brief snapshot of where we are. But as I said, happy to answer anything later on, or indeed chat to anyone in the networking.
Thanks a million,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Very, very comprehensive overview, and definitely gets into the nitty-gritty of the contractual in an evolving situation such as what everyone's been working through over the last year. And just to encourage everybody to pop your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll be taking them after our final speaker today. So I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker, who I know has made a really serious effort to be here with us today. And that person is John Gerard. John is widely regarded as a key figure in the development of simulation within contemporary art. Deceptively looking like film or video, his works are virtual worlds made using real-time computer graphics, a technology developed by the military and now used extensively in the gaming industry. His work is in the collections of, for example, Tate, London, MoMA, New York, IMA, Dublin, and many private collections internationally. His extremely popular Mirror Pavilion was commissioned by Galway International Arts Festival for Galway 2020 European Capital of Culture, and maybe some of you will have been lucky to see that. So really delighted, John, you could join us, and looking forward to hearing your shot of insight. So thanks so much, John. Over to you.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks CultureWorks for inviting me, and good to be connected with the Irish Arts Council, which historically have given me some very fundamental support, I have to say. When I was really a young artist in 2001, I was supported by the Irish Arts Council to spend time in the Ars Electronica Future Lab in Linz, where I did the foundational work in simulation that's really led to everything that I do. And actually, alongside a number of key grants from the Irish Arts Council, at moments I really needed that support, So it's just very nice to step in here in the context of the Arts Council, which gives transformative support to artists exactly when they need it. So it's just good to kind of come in and in a way contribute to what you guys are doing. So I have two sets of notes that I've prepared, not specifically for this webinar, but for other lectures. And they are very particularly about NFTs. And I'm going to share, can you share in the chat? The first one's called sim.stream/notes. You don't have to go there yet. I'm going to talk through them first. I'm going to share my screen. The second one is called regenerate.farm/thevolve. So I think they're all in the chat. Sim.stream/notes and regenerate.farm the Volve. So starting with sim.stream.notes, first of all, I just want to say that there's been an awful lot of press about NFTs of lots and lots of sorts. And I'm going to briefly say NFTs are incredibly important, non-fungible tokens. There are many, many issues surrounding them. The environmental cost of blockchain, in particularly Bitcoin and Ethereum, is very serious and should not be underestimated. But if you look at a coin like Tezos, it's 2 million times more energy efficient than Ethereum. And it's around about the same, minting an NFT on Tezos is around the same energy as tweeting. So I would say take the energy panic around blockchain with some caution and don't allow it to scare you off addressing this area, because blockchain is a huge deal and it is a transformative deal for culture. So why is it a transformative deal for culture? I'm just going to share my screen for a moment and talk about that. So before I do so, I'm going to just say this particular link, which is regenerate.farm/thevolve, talks about really what NFTs are, and really domain names as the first NFT. That's an incredible podcast from Holly Herndon, a wonderful, wonderful musician, and her partner, the artist Martin Dryhurst. I just want to say that you have to, in this new blockchain context, understand culture as a form of currency. You have wallets and tokens in people's digital wallets, and those tokens are collectibles. Culture, which is collected, but then it's also traded in. Look at Blau's drop on Nifty Gateway. Look at the kind of money he's raising. Over 333 seconds, he's raising $1.6 million. Resale is huge in NFT space because his fans are trading in his techno tracks. That's the next link, which is the Nifty Gateway marketplace. Look closely at that and understand it. I'm just talking a little bit here about blockchain eats countries, energy panic, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into that now. But basically, and also that's my NFT, Western Flag NFT, which I did as a protest against really what happened with Beeple, which was a transactional story. It had nothing to do with the culture of blockchain. And then really, these are just various notes you can read in your own time. The most important thing here are observations on blockchain, protocol, network, community, and market. So if you have time, read those notes and try and absorb the impact and the importance of what NFT is going to do to culture. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to jump to the next set of notes for a young artist on this call who are confused by this thing. This is sim.stream/notes. It talks about what art NFTs often are. They're often crystalline. They're often post-resolution. They're often infinitely recursive. They're often intersecting with electronic music. They're often allowing a broader representation. And there's other notes about what they are. So really, I've only got 5 minutes, so I have to be very tight here, and I'm nearly up already. I only have 2 minutes left. But what I want to say to you, young creators, is as follows. The NFT space is a new horizon for public art. Not only that, but it is completely changing how young creators can make a living, because it is Web 3, not Web 2. In Web 2, you have Instagram, where you're expected to post your creativity for free. You actually transfer the rights to your material to Instagram when you do that. As a reward, you're given something called likes, and your community is exposed to advertising. All the money goes to Instagram. It's not working for creators. You need to focus away from Instagram and social media and take blockchain very, very seriously, because it's a place where you can make a very meaningful income as a young creator. Look at Tezos, look at all these new chains that are coming up, which are listed on my different notes here. Hike Nunk, there's 15,000 creators a week coming onto Hike Nunk. It's an open sea of visual material, and it's a horizon for both public art and how creators are going to be making a living into the future. The last thing I'm going to say is I'm currently working with a major museum in the United States to get them on chain, to get them onto the blockchain. And that's an interesting process because everybody thinks that NFTs are only about auction. NFTs are cultural artifacts. You have to understand that. You could be commissioned by a museum to make an NFT, you can sell it elsewhere, but it can live on chain, as they say, forever. So pay attention to this space. It's a very important space. It's not going away. It's going to change music industry. It's going to change the art industry, and it's already moving at warp speed. In the next 12 months, it's going to be a big reordering of media industries. So my message on this webinar is pay attention right now.
Thanks very much, John. That's a brave new world to me. All that language is kind of first time I've ever heard it, but totally fascinating. And I think you should expect plenty of questions on that later on too. And rightfully raising the issue of rights versus likes, you know, which I think some people not necessarily would be aware of at this point. So thank you so much, John. And just to remind people, pop your questions in the Q&A. If you wouldn't mind also just notifying in the chat, or in the Q&A rather, who your question is for, or if it's just for the panel in general. So we now come to our final speaker of the webinar, Una Monaghan. Una is a harper, composer, researcher and sound artist from Belfast. Una also works as a sound engineer specialising in Irish traditional music and experimental live electronic and multi-channel music, a role in which she travels worldwide. In 2019, she received the inaugural Liam O'Flynn Award from the Arts Council of Ireland and the National Concert Hall Dublin, and in 2020 a BAM Award from Moving On Music and Improvised Music Company. So Una, over to you.
Thanks so much, Owen. It's really lovely to be here. So yes, just to say that I work as an artist. I do 4 different things. Owen's just said. I'm a composer, performer, live sound engineer primarily, and I also work in academia. And to think of what I wanted to say today, I started to write, and sort of a flood came out in terms of my thoughts and observations over how the last year has been. I wanted to remember everything I was thinking, but I also didn't want to make yet another PowerPoint presentation, and that initial sudden feeling about that spoke volumes to me. And I think being on a screen again, the last thing I wanted to do was remove the main live thing connecting, you know, the video, and replace it with some slides, to put another layer between me and an audience. As someone who has spent 20 years learning that the visual often always still trumps the audio, so it was an interest of mine, you know, we've always had music videos for a long time now. It was always an interest of mine to see how I could present sound and invite people to listen without looking. So unless we train to listen in that way, like the digital world we occupy now and also have occupied pre-COVID has not set us up to listen in the first instance over seeing. So I was someone who always tried to present audio without visual where I could, and that was from a place of personal interest. And it seemed to me that the pandemic removed even that personal preference or slight rebellion in the digital world. So I've organised some thoughts into different sections. And the first one I've called "This is not what we do as musicians." And it's not necessarily a negative thing. I work interdisciplinary, you know, with poets, with writers, with filmmakers all the time. So I'm not someone who says I'm a musician and that's it. But it's really worth mentioning and considering from the point of view of musicians when all of this happened. I found that we had to make films very quickly, that there had to be something to present in a 2D way. And to me, you know, film has been something I've worked with. I work with a trio that does live sound to film. But it is, in a way, a different art form, and it has its whole set of skills and personnel and training, and that wasn't something that I considered myself to be a specialist in. this is also coming from a point of view of I am a digital artist. Like I work with live electronics when I play. I work with tape pieces, and I work with motion sensors to control the computer as I play. So I'm at home working with digital tools, but all of my tools have been designed for its effect in live performance. So they've all been geared towards presenting something live. Same with engineering. I made the choice to become a live engineer more so than studio. So I thrive on that live front of house control rather than being alone really in a studio. So I love live in all of my pieces of work. To then have that really taken away, while I was happy working digitally, it was a real wrench. And it also felt like a strange thing to have put all of your energy into over the years to then it just disappear. My relationship with making film versions of what I did previously was that it was a document of a live event, and often a fleeting live event. So if I had made a sound art installation, for example, I would always try to put budget into having a really good quality film document of that would be 2 to 3 minutes long, so that I could present it online as a record of the event, but also as a way to let other people who couldn't come see it. But that was quite a big chunk of budget. You know, often that cost me a lot of money, and it was a really important part of making sure that something that was fleeting had a life afterwards, but it wasn't what the actual art was. I then had to confront the fact that I had to make these videos, but I had to make them. You know, there was no budget then to call up someone to document, a really skilled filmmaker. And where do I go with that sense of, before I called a whole other team to do this, and now I have to do it? And that had implications for me both, you know, in terms of the quality of the film that I was making. And that didn't sit well with me as an artist. The other thing is that software is a language, and you have that use it or lose it thing. So there was a lot of talk about how wonderful this was, that we were upskilling and that we were becoming filmmakers and that we were learning to make, you know, to learn editing, film editing tools. For me I have done that over the last year, and you know, to remember those tools, you have to use them all the time, and that is a bit of a strange headspace to be in, to think, okay, if this investment in learning to make films is going to be of value to me, I'm going to have to keep doing it. So if you don't, you then have to go back again and start and learn again. The next section, I guess I've called access and privilege. And that's because there was a blue sky thinking element to this that I wondered whether I was avoiding. You know, it's weird as an artist to be invited to expand your horizons in this way, look at the digital world, look at presenting it online, and to have in some ways a negative reaction to that. I was suspicious of that, and I thought, what am I avoiding here? What sense of growth or expansion am I avoiding? But the ability to view that change as an opportunity for growth really comes with stability. You know, you have to be in a position that you have your bills covered, for example, before you can decide that this is a wonderful opportunity for growth. And so many artists were simply not in that position, those not immediately trying to cover bills. So I think the pandemic has exacerbated access issues in art making, and also who is represented, like who has access to this tech. I do know that it has made things a lot easier for artists with additional needs. The ability to be in touch, the ability to learn and access art from home is really a game changer for many people who had additional needs, audiences and artists alike. So while that's wonderful, I also think we just need to think a wee bit about what it means to individual artists to access and continually access these expensive tools. The next section, online can feel dangerous. We were already doing a lot online. Everyone was, you know, admin, promo, applications. And now it can sometimes feel like everything is happening in the same space. So not only was your admin, your office work as an artist on your computer, but suddenly then as a musician, your performance work is also on the computer. And as soon as you open that, you're kind of at a mercy, you know, all of the notifications, all of that space. And for some people, the physical and the headspace of being on a stage versus on a computer is really important to their production and their ability to produce. As well as the noise, online was already a really crowded and noisy place to try to be heard pre-pandemic, and that has only got, I guess, worse for individual artists trying to make their voice heard. I've had to try to be very strict with my time choices as an artist. You open the computer, am I doing something creative here, or am I doing something admin related here? And I have to say that I've definitely failed to delineate that time to protect my creativity, because it's all on a computer. I was someone who spent a lot of time trying really hard to make bespoke experiences, and now, it doesn't feel that personal, or at least I'm back to square one with recreating that. It feels like we're back at renegotiating. The landscape has changed, and it hasn't come with the protections that we might have fought for as artists. So we haven't worked out everything about what these contracts mean, and that, in theatre, there are more structures and precedents for that than there are, I think, with individual artists and with individual musicians. It feels like we're often having the same conversations as we previously did, but from a weaker position. And then the last thing I'd say about online being dangerous is that I really remember something that happened early in lockdown, really early, like I think it would have been March 2020, and there was this explosion of artists presenting their work online, even just home videos for free. And there was this sense that this awful thing has happened. As musicians, what can we do? What can we produce? What can we give? And also just that need to perform. So we have no stage, can we give? And I was so deeply disturbed by this. But it was only when I spoke to another musician, a brilliant freelance classical musician with, a great career pre-pandemic, who was in bits, and they said, every time I go online I see all of my peers making videos. I cannot bring myself right now to make those videos, and all I can see is the career I worked for disappearing hour by hour, because if I'm not in that space, if I'm not making noise, I am invisible. And the pain that musician had, that was a year ago, really early, so I tweeted about that experience, and it was shared a lot of times, and I really felt that it was something that individual artists really identified with. The next section is about what working digitally means. We know about all the positives and about all the access and how that's great and how it's easy, how you can show up to a gig 10 minutes before where you would have had to travel. But it also means you work alone, which is massive. I have had instances where, it has been for less pay, for no pay, that you've had to fight for the time, ask for the time that it takes you to produce that. And I've had comments like, but you're not leaving your house. So it feels like we're back to square one in many ways. The most ironic one was a suggestion from a TV company that I take part in something that was to raise awareness of an underrepresented group at this time. And I said, what's the fee? And they said, well, we're not commissioned and we can't offer you a fee. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to prioritise things that are paying me in my creative work. So this was to draw attention to artists within the pandemic, and they weren't paying. So there are lots of podcasts. I did many podcasts over the last year, many conversations that are all out there, but they're general, they're not interview based about a piece of work. So it's all about tell me about your life and your work. But once you do 5 of those, and once you have no control over when they're going to be taken down, it seems a bit strange to have 5 such conversations out that you have no control over when they're going to not be out. It results in a lot of content released by others that we suddenly don't really have control over. An internet presence of yourself that really just appeared, which can be good but can also be bad. And so that sense of no going back really in ways chills me to the bone. The second last section is just about practicalities. I could talk a lot about the different projects that I was involved with over the last year. There's one I'm going to make which had a concept that was supposed to be live, and now it's going to basically become a film. A really interesting film, but the concept for that art piece was not a film. And every day I'm trying to bend my musical piece into a film, and every day I think, this was never supposed to be a film. And that just basic conceptual issue is always there. Another one where I had to record something in situ, and you're suddenly confronted with a theatre team who were not trained or experienced for years in making films, and you're putting your art piece out there through a filter of a team that is not a film team. The flip side of that is to do a piece of work for a very well established big concert hall where they have had the money to bring in a whole film crew, and then as the live engineer for that, you engage with the artists, but after your stream goes out, it goes to the film people, and they have ultimate control over the cuts and over how the audio goes out online. So I'm a live engineer in that situation, and I've mixed the piece, but ultimately it's not my audio that's going out. So what am I then? So there's another piece comes in, it's yet another film, and I really haven't the heart to do it, but that's my income stream at the minute, so where's the choice there? And the other thing is, I've been able to work in all my 4 areas in different times during the year. Given academic lectures, you finish your lecture, you shut down the computer, and the adrenaline is there, but you're alone. That's a really weird situation as well. In music or in performance, you at least have the audience, you have the breakdown, you have that few hours, but you're suddenly back in your room with adrenaline with no release. Projects get put out, but there's a lack of rehearsal time, there's a lack of gear up time. You know, the next time I go to do a live sound engineering, I won't get 3 goes at being at a mixing desk again. I won't have seen one for a year, but I will have the same amount of time to use one, which will be fine, but it's strange. You don't get to physically go somewhere as an artist anymore, which for many people, the trips fuel your next piece. You know, those times spent on planes and cafes in new environments, that's often where your next piece comes from. That's no longer the case. There's no context for the audience as to where we're situated. They used to see tech hiccups, they don't see them anymore, so they can't tell you've just fixed your audio, whereas before everyone was able to view that. And the last thing on that is that I've found I've had to fight for performance options. So where I think that it might be possible that I could do a tour in person in 4 months, where they say, but we could do a film now. And I say no, because the film, for a start, the film you'll be paid once. The performance tour is, 17 odd days of gigs. So it's really not the same situation. I think I'm pretty much out of time. So when things get released online, it's also, I'll do 3 or 4 projects and their release dates, those people aren't all coordinating. So their release dates may all be the same week. And I then have to do social media for all 4 projects in 1 week. That's fair.
I hate to break your stride, but we are almost on top of the time.
Oh, no bother. I guess I get to your questions. There's another page. I think it maybe just shows that there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you'll have seen in the chat, folks, there will be an option to carry on from this session to the networking session. So anything that we don't get to pick up on now, you will have an opportunity to do so shortly. Okay, so I'm going to start to take some questions that have come in the chat. Some lovely comments there for all our speakers, including for yourself there, Una. Fantastic. Thank you so much. One of the early questions that came in that I think is for the entire panel is really around the issue of access to digital and the fact that so many still don't have that access. So I'll put that out to our panel if anybody wants to pick up on that. Obviously, it has become an increasing area of focus for so many organizations to use digital, but not everybody has access. So I don't know, Brian, Neil, or Una, if you'd like to come in on that particular point.
I'll start if you want. I raised it briefly because I think there's a potential real disparity of access here, and I say that from a point of privilege, that the Abbey has the means to work we work with a company called Area Man primarily at the moment, who are fantastic. And they're fantastic. It's fantastic on two ways. One, they're brilliant at what they do. Secondly, our team are learning from them. So that whole issue around we're theatre makers, we're not filmmakers. There's a learning happening. But I say to our team all along, there's a real panic around to say we should never be filmmakers. It's not what we do. We make theatre. And I think moving forward, there's a real role for the Arts Council in terms of, as I said, just briefly to repeat it really, we have to make sure that not only the Abbey can access these people to get our work seen. If this is going to be the way forward, if we are saying we live in a world where the live performance is an element and it has to be the primary element of what we do, but there is another element, particularly if monetization becomes part of that world and where people are actually making money from I mean, John Gerard's piece was fascinating, and that's a rabbit hole I'm going to be going down later on today, I suspect. But clearly, there are ways to monetize work, which the Abbey hasn't been doing actually. But if monetization is linked to high quality digital output, everybody has to have access to high quality digital output, and that's the big challenge, I think.
Thanks for that, Neil. I don't know, Brian, do you want to come in on that as well, or Una?
I'd probably, I'd echo absolutely what Neil is saying. I mean, we were fortunate, I suppose, to be able to, again, bring in expertise on the two productions we did this year. I mean, bring in, very senior director of photography to come in and certainly to do the job, and indeed to, support us in understanding how that work is done. And absolutely, I mean, our focus was what we feel we do best, obviously, is create the theatre piece, and we focused on making a theatre production and then working with experts in the other field, I suppose, to make sure that that's streamed in as high quality as possible. So yeah, I mean, that's a fortunate position to be in, of course. It's interesting. I mean, one of our central missions is always to that people should be able to access high quality art in their own community, and obviously the ability to stream it does help that, particularly when people are physically unable to travel because of restrictions and that kind of thing. But it's it's certainly it's an interesting one. I think access is going to become which is great. It's going to become a really important talking point as we go forward, and we shouldn't forget to not assume that everyone immediately even has access to the ability to stream something on a laptop or a PC or anything. That other ways of getting to people and making sure that the art is accessible to them. So yeah, ongoing thought for sure.
Yeah. Una, just briefly, did you want to mention anything around that in terms of accessibility? I know it picks up on some of your points earlier.
Yeah, it just seems to me to be impossible to expect that you can reach the same number of people if not everyone can afford the tech. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a very specific question. There is a question, by the way, around NFT and definitions. And just to say, I think it's in the chat there that there's going to be a webinar at 12 where NFT will be discussed in more detail. But a very specific question here around fee expectations. So question here which says, I found there's a massive disparity between the fee expectations or typical fees of videographers / cinematographers coming from the field of screen work and other crew members. If emerging theatre companies can surmount the implicit exclusion from the digital sphere as a result of streaming costs, how can we ensure parity of pay in the face of these differing standards? So quite a specific one there. I don't know, would either Neil or Brian want to take that one from a...
Yeah, I think it's a massive issue, and I think it's one of the learnings. It shows how poorly theatre is paid, often compared to other industries and to broadcast particularly. And I think actually it links into the previous question, which is the previous issue around access to digital. I don't think it's appropriate actually for theatre companies to be hiring cinematographers. To me, that's not the world. They're two worlds. And I think what we need is a structure and a system whereby there is an infrastructure that theatre can tap into that exists. But if theatre has to take on the contracting and indeed have the expertise to contract some of these people, we're into a very, very, well, one could say brave new world. I think it's a frightening new world, actually. So I think there's it's a massive issue. I don't have the answer to it, but we've come across it. And I say, again, I think that comes down to resource, and it comes down to someone like the Abbey being able to pay the fees, and we're not being exploited in any way. I suspect the film companies are doing this at cut price rates in order to do theatre, but the disparity is alarming. And I think it's something that, before this gets too far down the road, has to be properly addressed. So it's a really good question, to which I'm afraid I don't have the answer, but I feel the pain.
John, I see you're back with us, and we're delighted to have you. One question that came in for you, which was in relation to, let me just find it here. Oh my goodness. Can John explain the definition of NFT? I obviously didn't pay attention and missed the definition at the top.
Okay, so fundamentally, an NFT is a non-fungible token. And two explanations. First of all, something that is fungible can be broken into two parts. So a euro is fungible, 50 cents, 50 cents. A domain name is non-fungible, because my domain name, johnjared.net, if I break it in two, it loses all value. It becomes meaningless. So a non-fungible token is something that cannot be broken into two parts. A coin, a crypto coin, is fungible, because you can take a Bitcoin and you can break it into 1,000 parts. So first of all, an NFT, a non-fungible token, is, a unique thing that is, it's unique and it can't be broken into parts. Fundamentally, what it is a smart contract, like effectively. And what it achieves is it renders a digital artifact a thing of value. And particularly for culture, what you have to understand, the most radical thing is that thing of value transforms culture into kind of a coin, which is quite radical and quite shocking in a way, where you have people investing in NFTs in a way that they also invest in stocks. Now, don't be too shocked, because for many, many years, every time you read about a painting selling for $100 million, that painting is a token. The people who are buying it with their $100 million are financiers. I don't have $100 million, neither do you. The people who have that are financiers. They put their money into a token, they know they can get it out. It just happens to be a painting. Now, radically, in the last few months, the Beeple sale has penetrated the global consciousness, because you have what people describe as a JPEG, which sells for $69 million. Culture shock. And I would say one of the reasons you don't know what an NFT is, in a way, is because what we understand to be visual culture has actually actively held out the digital for like 20 years. There is an incredibly nostalgic language around art in art schools, in galleries, in museums, in biennales. I mean, I went to Documenta a couple of years ago. I was like, this could have happened in 1950. Where are contemporary conditions? Where are they? Where are the digital creators? And suddenly, boom, here they are, knocking the door down with their value. You go onto Foundation now, you go onto Super Rare, you've got $1 million NFTs left, right, and center. And that's a shock for the gallery world that still have historic media on the wall in art fairs, in little booths, expecting you to fly across the world to get there. So I'm kind of expanding a bit too far, but basically an NFT is a non-fungible token. It renders a digital file a thing of value, and it is blowing up right now. And 12 months time, this landscape will be a lot clearer. But at the moment, it's transforming culture in a radical way.
Thanks so much, John. We are just literally almost 5 minutes past 11. So at this point, I'm going to just say thank you so much to all our speakers today. You've been fantastic. And I know that everybody participating today will really appreciate both your insights and the opportunity maybe to ask you more questions in the networking session that follows. But for now, I'm going to hand back to Liz Kelly and just say thank you. And I hope that everybody got as much out of this session as I did, even just listening in as a chair. So thanks so much, and bye from me.
Thank you, Alvin, for your very able handling of our very first webinar of 4. Really interesting insights there, from beginning with Neil and teaching us a new word for the day. So I'm not going to repeat that. We promised we wouldn't do that again. But very, very welcome acknowledgement as well that this isn't a level playing field, that organisations are resourced very differently, and that there are implications in terms of planning and funding for organisations if we remain in this and if we continue to work in this digital space. Thanks to Brian for a really good checklist in terms of the sort of production requirements. You're really operating at the nexus there of a number of different art forms. So that was a really valuable piece of information that you shared with us in relation to particularly the Van Boland Journey of a Poet, which we all loved so much and we're lucky to see on our screens at home. Una, a brilliant reflection, critical reflection as an artist, and sort of the kind of dichotomous, that push and pull that we all feel around the digital world as well. So I thought you articulated that really beautifully and we appreciated that. And John, who is hectically busy, thanks so much as well for joining us this morning and for shedding some light on NFTs. Again, new language, completely new language for me and for many people I know listening in today. So thanks so much for that. Really valuable input, and to Maureen Kennelly for opening up, and to Alwyn for chairing. Just to say, actually, during the networking today, we have Area Man, Shane from Area Man will actually be present during the networking, as will Q1 and Atlantic Audio, all of whom are here and willing and open to sharing their expertise on the technical front. And so that's definitely something that you won't want to miss if you want to gain some insights there. And then also we have Kevin McCoy and Jennifer McCoy joining us from New York later on the very subject of NFTs. So they will expand again. So do join us for the Business End seminar, which will be at 12 o'clock. So for now, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And we'll hop over into our networking and we will see you all later. So on for now.